I've been thinking about, it doesn't seem like social media is going anywhere.
Mhm.
Like, it seems like it's pretty well rooted itself into our culture at this
Okay.
point. So it makes me wonder if at some point somebody's actually going to make it better. Because, like, it seems to me to have just gone downhill. And there have been attempts like Google, what was the Google Plus or something?
Yeah, yeah.
That makes me wonder if at some point somebody is actually going to come along and be like, here is a social networking platform that is actually solving many of the annoyances. Because, like, I don't know anybody who likes Facebook, but we all use it. We all go on there because we don't really have a choice. Everybody's on there. I know a lot of people who don't use it, especially younger folk.
Well,
And Instagram is much better than Facebook, I guess.
I
But
suppose it just really depends on what it is people are disliking specifically. There are so many different ways to engage in Facebook land that to just say they don't like Facebook doesn't particularly make sense, because they should be more descriptive. I don't appreciate groups on Facebook. I don't like shitty, grumpy people saying shitty, grumpy things on Facebook. I don't like those are behaviors that exist in all sorts of social media, unless you curate and have, like, it's not different than the way that we construct and create our own reality, right? You could use Facebook as an experiment to then work on your own internal projections and who you're being in the world that encourages a certain sort of engagement, theoretically.
Fuck you, Adrian.
Okay, cool. I really did want to bring the conversation back to who the fuck we are, right?
Okay.
Not just like I'm Adrianne Gunn.
Do we want to start now, though?
And
like,
you're Nicholas Rave. Yeah, hold on.
Do we want to actually start?
I was out of focus, but now I'm back.
I'm keeping that part. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Enlightened Couch Potato Show. My name is Nicholas Rave, and this is
Adrianne Gunn.
And what are we here to do, Adrianne?
Well, we are two humans who were obsessed with, delighted by, and improved from, because I'd already used by, our obsession and delight in personal development and growth. And we're here to talk about the ways in which you can utilize movies and television as a tool for transformation.
So it's like personal development junkie, movie buff overlap, right? Like like I'm super into movies and I'm super into making myself better in every possible way. Yeah. How can we merge those things?
Yeah, it's like personal development and the movie buffing in the buff, making commentary babies.
That's what Enlightened Couch Potato is. It's the baby of that union.
Yes. You're welcome. Yeah. So today, the things that I wanted to talk about, the shows that I've been watching this week and the life I've been leading lately, have me back into just appreciating how different life can be when you show up to it differently, when you allow yourself to filter for new information. Holy balls.
Do tell.
Well, several things happened in my last couple of weeks. One of them is that people, without provocation or marketing, have been hiring me to do the thing, like one of the things I say I can do, which is help people shift their life. So I've had a lot of quit smoking clients. I've had people shifting habits.
Without putting a lot of effort out there, things have been just manifesting.
Zero marketing or effort. People reaching out to me for the last many weeks. And I keep saying yes and putting them in my calendar. And that's awesome. But I'd also said yes to a bunch of other stuff and put them in my calendar. And I'm learning new things about how I like to engage and how I like to entrepreneur. And I was feeling kind of pooped and wondering, like, who the fuck makes this schedule? Because mama needs some downtime and to actually fucking relax.
Yes to a lot.
Well, or there's a way in which I need a lot of rest time. So what's been funny is I've been showing up and doing great work with clients and showing up and being fully engaged and fully present where I'm asked to, and then just checking the fuck out by watching TV. So a couple of weeks ago, my checking the fuck out was like, no, it's me time, was just caught up on all of Winona Earp. all through, like they're in season 4.
Yeah, you talked
They
about that
halftime
one
break.
last week. Yeah.
So I just binged the shit out of that. This week, it's been Aquarius, which is David Duchovny plays a cop back in 67. Like it's the LAPD juxtaposed with Charlie Manson, and the Panthers, and that whole world. It's just sort of following the life of the cop between when he meets Manson.
Is this based on true story?
It's sort of based on true story, and they fictionalized some stuff. So
yeah, I think I heard about this because we don't have to go on a long tangent. There's some fascinating stuff about the CIA and Manson, and how Manson may have been a quote unquote victim of MK Ultra.
Huh.
That he actually was like, there's some really fascinating, can't remember what the book is called, but I think that guy, his story was co-opted for this movie, but then whoever is the filmmaker, he had 2 stories that he wanted to merge together, and then it ended up being too much. So he focused on the stuff in Aquarius, and he didn't go into the government conspiracy, Charles Manson stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty fascinating. And so I'm watching that show, and to contextualize, so I am getting to experience great results and awesomeness utilizing tools of hypnosis and mind hacking ninjery, right? And then I watch Aquarius, where we've got detectives who utilize language and role playing and other such they utilize reading body language, they utilize looking at a scene to assess something, and they utilize their own linguistic powers to have people confess and, figure out what the fuck's going on. Kind of cool. And then one of my and also what's interesting about Aquarius is it's set in this peak time of social uprising. So Vietnam is happening.
Right. Age of Aquarius.
MLK is shot.
Right.
Robert Kennedy is shot. Black Panthers are coming up. And so the topic is very, very similar to what's going on now in the world. Plus, right now I'm in Oregon, and I am in I'm just next to the green zone of the be ready zone to evacuate because there's fuck tons of fire. So around me, the world looks pretty post-apocalyptic or during apocalyptic. Apocalypticastical is the orange skies and ash falling, and I cannot breathe, and the smoke's coming into my house. So like that sense of danger and utility is happening. One of the days, since it was so smoky and windy, and I was going to do work with a client in a park, we just rescheduled. And so I got this hooky day. Like all of the things on my calendar was like, it's gone. It's too gross outside to go out because there's like literally falling trees. The only thing I did was consider moving my car from my driveway under a tree to like my lawn. Unfortunately, the car in front of my house moved, and I moved my car.
Well, what's with the falling trees? That's not about fire.
So first what was happening was there was a warm as fuck storm. It's like 90s, 93 degrees for a bunch of days, and gusts of wind up to 60 miles an hour.
Well,
so all over the state, they're like, we're going to have to strategically be shutting down power to not start fires. It's fire season. We're going to have windstorms. Power's going to go out. So I'm like, well, I was sort of running out of groceries and had to decide, well, so if I buy groceries, but my power goes out, then that's just food that's going to rot. That's dumb. And if I go outside, I have to breathe that and avoid trees and debris and then other crazed people freaking out. So I was just like, my schedule's free and I've been feeling exhausted. Also, there's not a lot of oxygen around. So I'm just gonna, apparently what I did was watch this show Gypsy on Netflix. And Gypsy was one of the first Netflix originals put out. It only had 1 season. And its premise is there's this psychologist, so that's a therapist. I think she's a cognitive behavioral psychologist who gets overly interested and involved in her client's life. This is a woman who's like got not great boundaries, and it's a fascinating thing to watch a character who's, is she bad at therapy? Is she being manipulative on purpose because she wants to stir up a storm? Probably. It's like the whole show is like watching a train wreck of this woman who lives in the suburbs. She's like, I got a kid, but she's got her own issues, which you sort of figure out. It's a slow burn of a show. And in the top of my mind in this week where I'm seeing a lot of clients and understanding the transition for me from being the kind of person who could read people. Like, I don't know if I've said this before, but I used to be an asshole.
You've mentioned it.
Yeah. Like 15 years ago, I could read people so quickly. It's like you grow up in a traumatic family. You're the kind of kid who gets like teased and bullied. You just have to figure out how to like see where it's coming from and be humorous and like whatever defense mechanisms make sense. And so at some point I recognized that I could read people and then I could poke them and hurt them. So it's a really interesting thing now as a supremely recovered asshole to watch people specifically utilizing language and what they see about people to manipulate them. So watching this therapist fucking over people and not entirely knowing her motivations for it, but getting to see her life. It's like a big train wreck. Watching Charlie Manson as played by this character and what he's doing to woo these women into his worldview.
Yeah.
And what this cop is doing to say, oh my God, it's pretty fucking fascinating. The amount of power we have with language and our own charisma.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been my adventure.
So I'm not super big on the true crime genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've never watched, I guess true crime's the wrong word, but I've never been like a CSI procedural cop show kind of person. That's not my thing. There's a TV show on Netflix called Mindhunters.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really interesting because that one's based on a true story. So I kind of like, I guess there's this resistance I have to fake characters with fake motivations, because when you're talking about stuff that serious, like I feel like you learn about why people do things from the psychology behind those stories. And the thing that made it interesting in Mindhunters was this is based on actual interviews with serial killers, like word for word.
Yeah.
And there's something like deeply educational about that. So did I tell you about my recent YouTube true crime bunny hole trail that I went down?
I don't know if you did.
So I found this channel. Oh, I want to give a shout out, but I can't remember what it's called right now. I'll put a link down below at some point. So there's this channel where this interrogation expert breaks down actual video of interrogations done by detectives with almost all of them are murderers. Somebody who killed somebody, and they show how they trap them linguistically. And what's really interesting is he even shows some ones that go badly, and he criticizes, he critiques the officers in this case, and he's like, here's an example of one where they fucked it up and they had to throw this out. Like he wasn't a murderer.
Right.
And then there's other ones where they're like, you have to be careful not to do this, or you can actually get false confessions. You can get people to confess to shit. But the reality is, I guess it sort of hit me that I was like, most cops don't want the wrong person to confess. So when you when that happens, it's because they were doing the process wrong. Like that doesn't happen if you're doing it correctly. But the techniques, when you are guilty, they are relentless. And so the thing that's so like weirdly delicious to me in some kind of fucked up way, the moment when you see someone's life fall apart. Like you're watching these people in an interrogation room go, oh my God, I'm going to go to jail forever.
Yeah. Oh.
Like I fucked up. and they got it, and there is no getting out of this. And like the way that cognitive dissonance starts playing with them in that moment. I mean, there's one example of a serial killer that they did this with. You have footage of the interrogation where he then at some point just goes, well, okay, here's how I did it. And he tells every detail, like, and you're like, he's totally clear. There's other ones where it was an accident, where it's like a teenage or young 20s kid who like was like, oh my God, what have I done? And he tries to get out of it and he tries to weasel away. And then they leave him in the room and the camera's still on him. And you see him just like, I don't know what it is about these videos, but there's something about like, you know, you used to be an asshole. I used to be a compulsive liar.
Right.
So it goes along with narcissism, which I also own. I'm a recovering narcissist as well. So there's this feeling of getting caught, like you're about to get caught in a lie. Like you told somebody you did something and you didn't, and you're about to get, and like that feeling inside me, it was so uncomfortable watching these videos because I was like, ugh, like I'm going to get in trouble. But I'm like, yeah, but I didn't do anything. And I'm a very honest person now.
Right.
So, yeah, I've been loving these. I've watched every single one on the channel. And it's just, there's something so purely real about it. Like getting to watch, this is actually happening. And you're seeing, this is how a person really responds and reacts and looks when they are an animal backed into a corner and it's over. Like it's over.
Totally.
Oh. Yeah, I love it.
I think what's also happened for me that's amazing, because like you're talking about this moment where they know that their world is completely over and there's a physiological shift and you can almost hear it happen.
Yeah.
It's like something explodes inside or something. We get to see that when people make a shift for the better. It's a similar like that transformation is similarly addictive of like turning the knobs and the dials. Their brain is like searching and then suddenly it's like pop and the world is opened up. It's very similar. What's been really healing for me watching these particular shows is that there are so many humans in these shows at different levels of self-destructive. I've sort of joked at and pointed at, like last time we were talking about the tropes of the like drinking a lot, fucking strangers, people like recognizing. I watched Gypsy when it came out. What was that, 6-7 years? It was a while ago. And just now embodying the distance between my ability to relate to these characters, and not just in a, like sometimes I'm here on our show and I'm like annoyed at those people, but like just going, wow, I think I remember being like that there were cells in my body that craved the whatever the fuck craziness that person is doing right now, and it's not even close to my reality. I've almost forgot that was something I could relate to, and that's been pretty fascinating and wonderful too as a healing setup. Is like,
totally.
I don't feel that version of lost and feisty and whatever the heck drew these characters to their decisions. I mean, if I was paid to do that part, I could get there. I could find it. I could remember and make it happen, and then return to a life that's pretty great and deeply felt and lacking a whole lot of really they were wise strategies for who I was then, right? And I don't know. I'm having one of those, like, I'm checking out of life and I'm just going to plop on my couch moments of just going, the magic of language, it's real. It's fucking cool. Even the darkness that these people can get these other people to do, that's magic and real and cool. And they're evil on television. Cool. But I'm using similar techniques to make people, their lives better.
I mean, I see the same thing by listening to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, well, you can't argue that he seems to be good at getting at least some people on his side. And that is a product of his language to a certain extent. So there's a lot to be learned from what he does, both how to combat it if you're ever in a situation with someone like that. So get used to it, get comfortable with that. Oh, I see what that person's doing. That's one of those strategies. But also because all of those tools of communication and influence are neutral. They're not bad.
Right.
They are. It depends on your intention for using it. He has his own intentions, but that doesn't mean you can't use most of the tools and techniques that he uses for good, for your own intentions.
Totally. Yeah. I imagine at this point it's going to be challenging. Well, I guess it's useful and easy to find examples of Donald Trump utilizing language in particular ways, and you can talk about it. But getting people to understand the other part, which is to have like as neutral and clean and clear an emotional palette, to then be able to make decisions, maybe harder for some people because definitely
the thing I always say about Trump is if he pisses you off, he's renting space in your head.
Yeah.
He desperately wants you to hate him. I think he might like people hating him more than he likes people loving him, because the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy.
Yep.
Love and hate are two sides of the same coin. The bottom line is you still give a shit.
Paying a lot of attention to them.
Yep. And that's what if you really want to get under Donald Trump's skin, don't give a fuck. That's how.
Yeah.
Because he wants to enrage everyone, because then you're still paying attention.
Yeah. But how many of us are that ninja on the bus?
It's challenging, but it's not impossible.
Okay, wait. Rita has joined us. I'm reading a comment, apparently just quietly to myself, which is not that entertaining on the tubes.
Hi, Rita.
So, there's a guy on AGT, which is abbreviate for something that I don't know yet, that spent 34 years in jail for something he didn't do. And his ability to forgive is amazing. I wish I could be like him. Or I wish I could like him. Forgive.
Yeah.
Woo.
I don't think this is the same person, but there was a podcast that I listened to. I've told this story before, so I'll do a short version. There's a podcast I listened to a number of years ago about the story was a young man who was 15 was wrongfully convicted of murdering his mother. He was sent to prison, tried as an adult, I believe. And when you go to prison, they know what you did, like all the other inmates, and your ranking in the pecking order has a lot to do with what it supposedly did. So he had to be kept in solitary confinement because every time they'd put him in the general population, someone would try to kill him.
Yeah.
So he was in there for something like 25 years, I think. And then finally, a private investigator working pro bono finally collected enough evidence to prove that he didn't really do it. And when he was released, one could understand if he would be the kind of person who would be resentful. Like that sort of thing would turn most people into a monster. Like you would just hate everyone. I mean, think about your reputation. Think about everyone thought you killed your mom and you didn't. Like you loved your mom.
Yep.
Like unbelievable. So he basically came out like enlightened. Like he took up yoga and meditation. And like when you listen to this guy talk, his insights on life and the world and people, the things he's seen, and his capacity to forgive and be like, I'm not keeping that. Like I'm not holding on to that because it's bad for me.
Yeah.
It's unreal. Unbelievable.
One of the most profound experience of television watching, which was both really life affirming but also challenging, was watching this show called Rectify. I'm supremely glad I remembered the name of it. So Rectify is a show. Where is it on? Theoretically, it's on Netflix, YouTube, iTunes. This young man, I think he's in high school or just 19 or so, when he is accused and sent to prison for life for killing his girlfriend. And so the interesting thing about this is his sister continues fighting appeals, and somehow gets him out for the sake of a new case, finds DNA evidence or cracks some hole. But he's, I think, spent 20 years on death row and returns to the town. And so you've got the trauma of this. You've got the question of like, did he do it? Did he not do it? You've got the trauma that of this young person being killed, lingering in the town, and then the lives of his parents and his sister. So this is a story of trauma. And then he's a young man who's been in prison for 20 years, which is traumatic. And so they start the story where he comes out seeming pretty enlightened and pretty like calm, and like it's a very interesting story. And it's also pretty dark and really, really sad. And I remember watching this at a time in my life where I was embracing the idea that emotions, like feeling emotions, was useful. And so I just let myself feel sad with the story. It's beautifully told. It's really well filmed. The cinematography is great. The writing and acting is amazing. And it's a perspective that I don't think I've seen in any show, where they recognize like what happens when a trauma ripples out into a community, and you see it affect all of these people for decades.
Some of the most interesting stories are where you're just like, let's take a group of people and drop a thing in it and then just see what happens and explore the ripple effects. I feel like we should comment here that one of the philosophies of Enlightened Couch Potato, and there's a book that I read called The Storytelling Animal, and it's about why human beings tell stories. And it doesn't have one answer. He presents many different theories, but one of them is stories are an ability to learn through other people's experiences. That you can tell someone a story, and now they don't have to do the thing that you did. They can go, oh, I don't need to do that myself. And if you don't have stories, you can't do that. But it's more complicated than just, oh, you like, there are tigers over there, don't go over there. Okay, I won't. That was a story. You just told me a story. I went over there and I saw tigers and they almost ate me. Okay, don't do that. Got it. But the reality is, you learn, you grow and expand your capacity by going on the journey of all the characters within a story. And we generally tend to identify more with like the hero or the protagonist, but you can let yourself feel in a safe environment. You can try on what it's like. That's what I was doing with those the interrogation videos, is like, I'm putting myself in that person's shoes and imagining what would it be like not only to have done what they did, but to be caught and to feel what that feels like. And even imagining what it would be like to be the interrogator, because like watching how they have to keep this high level perspective, what they do is so much like what we do coaching wise, but we're trying to like back people into a corner where they have to let go of their limitations and things. But this idea of like watching a tragedy and being sad and feeling it, if you don't let the story traumatize you further, if you really surrender to it, you come out of it more flexible. Like you have more emotional capacity to handle things, even though you didn't go through what they went through. This isn't to say like if you just sit around and watch movies with your whole life and you never go out and do anything that you can that you can become enlightened. But I don't know, maybe you can. Maybe you can learn through those experiences so thoroughly and so deeply that when you go out into the world, you know what to do.
Perhaps. I mean, we're having to sell the idea of this concept of our show as though tiny people don't model television characters and cartoons in the fucking first place. As though that isn't exactly how we became who we are today. Watching other people's stories that may make sense to us. Like pre-verbal, we're just soaking in all of the mannerisms and twitches and choices of humans saying words we don't understand and then making up stories about them to then be like, oh, I know, walking goes like this.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and it's almost like at some point we stop doing that as much. We stop letting them influence us as much. And I guess sort of our take on this is adults should be better, not worse, at learning from stories.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just said that and was like, ooh, yeah. Good one.
Well, and the other thing that I love is the idea that, yeah, maybe you could shift and change. But I think the other thing that we know is it's not just like get a new perspective, get a new learning, feel a shift inside. That's great. What actually also needs to happen is taking new action to reinforce the learning.
Right. You got to take it out into your real life. It's not enough to just leave it in here, because if you never go out and test it, you don't really, the lesson doesn't go all the way in until you actually go use it. Yeah, can I talk about a movie that I watched?
Please. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this. It's kind of a classic. Speaking of who we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I introduced my girlfriend to Total Recall.
Cool.
Have you ever seen it?
I have. It's been a while. Yeah.
Okay. So the premise, so little backstory. Total Recall, based on a book or a short story by Philip K. Dick, who also wrote the story that Blade Runner was based on. Cool. Which was called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? He had a very particular naming style. And then the one that Total Recall was based on was called We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. So the movie was made by Paul Verhoeven, who also made RoboCop, which is very much deeper than most people think it is. That movie is an allegory and a satirical movie that on the surface is a violent action film.
Sure. He
also made Starship Troopers, which is one of my favorite satires. Like that movie, when I first watched it as a kid, I was like, what is this? But I didn't get that it was satire. Like it's supposed to be saying, like, these guys who we're painting as the heroes, they're not.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to watch Total Recall, which an argument could be made is a much more straightforward story, but there's some deeper themes underneath that where I feel like Paul Verhoeven like put in his little subversive satirical stuff too.
Yeah.
But that movie is entirely about the idea that who you are is based on who you are right now is based on who you remember yourself as having been. The way that I think about it is that I always pretend or imagine that there is a moment every time you wake up before you remember who you are, when you could be anybody. That what if one day you woke up and you didn't remember one of those problems that you have that you have always struggled with, and you just wake up one day and are like, you forgot it. And then maybe you remember it a couple days later and you're like, oh shit, I'm an alcoholic. I forgot. That Tom Cruise movie that we talked about. Did you see Edge of Tomorrow yet?
Yes. I loved it.
Yeah. So Edge of Tomorrow, same kind of idea, is like who you are. You can change in an instant if you just one day woke up and you had a bunch of new memories. Or a bunch of old memories weren't there. And in the early days of hypnosis, people actually used to try and go and do this and like change your history. And they found that there are easier ways to make those changes. But the big implication that I took away from all this is you and I know about working with timelines, right?
Yes. So
you can go back, and the way that you go back and you work with memories is it isn't about changing the memory, because the person's unconscious will resist that. They'll be like, well, that's not actually what happened, and I know it deep down, so I can pretend it didn't happen, but it's not the same thing. So what you do is you go back and you change what the memory means to you.
Yes.
And by doing that, you change just the way the person responds now to that having happened. But I feel like there is a technique, a different technique that has not yet been fully formulated that's around. So you know how people use the quantum physics metaphor, which I very much emphasize that it's a metaphor.
Mhm.
They talked about this idea of like, changing your reality by changing your thinkings and the observer effect and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, quantum physics, like where physics has gone, if you want to take continued metaphors in physics, now a lot of people talk about this thing. Do you know what the many worlds theory of quantum physics is, or many worlds interpretation?
Heard. Do you see many? Like
many worlds.
Yes.
So the short version is that basically there is an infinite number of universes, and whenever you talk about the word infinity or that number, shit gets weird. Because if there's an infinite number of universes, there is an infinite number of us having this conversation. There's also an infinite number of us having a slightly different conversation. There's an infinite number of we've had this conversation an infinite number of times.
Sure.
And this sounds fucking ridiculous, but it's actually mathematically like a correct interpretation of physics. And it's like, what?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that like time is always happening, like much like the Slaughterhouse-5 thing of you're just sort of repeating and dropping in on the same thing. Like what we're doing now, we've done thousands of times before already.
Right.
And again, in the future.
Now, I will say, I personally think it's very important to separate this physics concept, which is talking about and describing the universe at a level that we don't really interact with it at that level. It's okay to take metaphors from that and apply it to the macro level of the world and not the quantum level of the world. But it does get dangerous, I think, if you start to take those metaphors literally. Sure. Because it's not like your thoughts actually go out into the world, and that's not really a thing. So the metaphor that I keep thinking about is this idea of dimension hopping.
Yes.
So the idea of being able to close your eyes and go, I'm just going to switch over to the universe where this is true. And I have not yet turned this into an actual hypnotic process, but I want to do that. I want to figure out how you can guide someone through a process where you're just like, what if it was true? What if you stepped through the looking glass?
Yeah.
And you came out on the other side, and all of a sudden you were not in that universe anymore. And you could slip back, but if you want to, you could stay in this universe. And that's what Total Recall talked to me about.
I've kind of done it. So we're talking about how we talk about, like, you don't change the story of the past. You change the meaning of the story of the past, right? I've done the thing where I'm having somebody in this process. I'm not going to really describe the process. In the process of going back and looking at and re-experiencing or experiencing differently past occurrences, I have had people get new learnings, obviously, from that setup, but also connect to... It's a combo of like connecting to an ideal future self, connecting to your higher self, connecting to your like spirit team, and all of the other infinite numbers of you who may have existed had that thing not happened. Because every single person has a belief about who they could have become had they not been teased. Or
so
they have
you
a
can
belief
go off on the timeline that didn't happen, go out into a future that is impossible, and take resources from that and bring it back. That's because
everybody,
great.
It's almost like people are like, I'm not confident. I wish I was confident. I'm going to pay you to help me with my confidence. And I'm like, well, the cool news about confidence is you have an entire list inside your brain about what confidence equals and how you're not those things. So let's write down the list of what are all these adjectives that you think you're not. Great. Yeah. So let's just, if you did think that you were these adjectives, what would you choose to do? So what I do is I have them access the ideas of who they would have been and the choices they would be making and how their life would feel and be different if this horrible thing did not happen,
Yeah.
or if they were able to become this future self they want to be, and like package up the gifts of learning and knowledge from their higher self, from their other, other infinite selves and their future self that they would like to be. And I have it somehow, and often it just depends on the language that they've used to describe any of this or their beliefs. And like sometimes you can just take that and squish it together into kind of like a seed of power that begins to, now you can throw it into your timeline at this moment, where you know that this change, if it is installed in your timeline here, you'll just have these abilities and emotions and experiences all throughout, and it can grow itself through your timeline forward. And then I have them like install this like infinite wisdom from their other selves or higher selves or whatever the heck. And then have them, as they're releasing the whatever they're releasing from their past, watch this new belief, new powers, new whatever install itself and sort of thread forward through their future. I don't know. I've played around with some of that.
Well, so
cool.
the distinction I would make is, I guess, as I'm thinking about it, what you're describing still feels like Back to the Future, which is awesome. You're using Back to the Future timeline, all that stuff in really creative and powerful ways. I feel like there's a Rick and Morty version of this where it's more about like, there's still an implication that there's a line of time and there's a chain of causality, and there are like laws and rules about the universe that are present even as you go in these different lines.
Okay. Sure.
And there's this dimension shifting ideas like, well, what if you just jump to a universe where that's not true? Like whatever it is you believe, what if you just right now you just go blip and now that thing isn't there anymore? And you're
suddenly a new person, and everything in the universe is now filtered through your new model of the world. And now the world that you're probably still in the same world, but you see it differently.
Or even the world, like if you can shift so completely that that the world changes too, like laws of fucking physics, like people like me aren't successful. Well, what if you go to a world where people like you are successful? Like I one of my friends, when he did timeline stuff, he modified it and came up with this metaphor where he would guide people through like walking into this time machine that would take them above the timeline. And it was just a narrative structure to make the hypnotic fantasy of going back and forward and whatever along your timeline that much easier.
Yeah.
And I feel like I haven't come up with the dimension jumping metaphor or like narrative yet, but I want to experiment with it. And Total Recall inspired me.
Yeah. Well, and it's different than sliding doors. They've played a lot.
Right.
One of the Batman. So the Arrowverse.
Very, that's a good example of multiple universes. That's what I'm talking about.
So the Arrowverse has a bunch of different shows, and throughout time of like the 8 seasons of Arrow, which birthed these other like Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, and Batwoman, there were agreements upon like how many Earths there were, and that would show up, and they played around with physics and time travel and what that means, and then crazy different stuff happens at the end of Arrow season 8, which is the final of its season, that just completely shifts the paradigm that you were living in and all of the rules that had been happening up until that point.
Right.
And and now this past year has been the first seasons for Flash, Batwoman, and Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow, where all of the universes are shifted, that the worlds that they built is now a new thing.
Yeah.
Which is very fascinating to watch. But like whether these multiple uses can exist in the same Earth at the same time. Whether Batwoman had this storyline of this certain point of trauma of a car accident, whether the sister is saved or not saved, whether mother is saved or not saved, and then how the character ends up. Like a lot of shows already play with the like, here's this pivotal moment of change point, and exploring the different multi-timeline.
Right. What if this happened, or like the alternate again, alternate timelines. But the thing that I agree with you about the DC EU, the extended universe around that, is that I would say even more so than Marvel. Marvel has this interconnected universe, but DC does this thing where they're like, oh no, this is a different Batman. Just like no.
Yeah.
And they're having these crossover experiences. So I've heard some rumors about the new Flash movie. So did you see the episode of the Flash of the TV show where the Flash from the movie showed up?
Oh, maybe not. I know I've
well,
seen the other Flashes. There have been other Flashes.
Yeah, no, there have. But the first time when they crossed over from the movie version to the TV show.
Maybe.
So anyway, the new Flash movie is going to have both Ben Affleck as Batman and Michael Keaton as old Batman. So they're like, we're leaning into this, and like
That's awesome.
That's cool. I like that. Oh wait, you're the version of this character. So then I'm just like, well, why don't you have multiple versions of you too, like from different universes? And what if there's a version of you? Maybe you're not that version all the time. Maybe there's just a version you can step into where you're an amazing presenter, and then you can just turn that one off and then slip back into the other universe. I don't know.
Totally. I love to make fun of the DC Universe shows for all their exposition. And the only time when I'm not mad at them is, and it almost always happens really well in Flash and then gets messed up in Legends of Tomorrow, where they like bring out the whiteboard and they do the squiggly lines and explain physics in the multi-universes and the different timelines. And so in Flash, they're pretty good at it. Like, okay, here's what, and there's, really quickly explaining physics and that sort of thing. And then in Legends, they're like, something about doppelgangers and then something in her. My favorite thing. But I love watching them quickly explain the different theories of how, like, if you do change something in your past, your memories catch up to you. Like when you get back to some point in the future, rather than you're destroying it and it's a new timeline. Does it install? Does it not? If you meet yourself in the past, does something explode? I don't know.
I guess the overarching theme of this exploration that we're talking about here is based on the idea that your past, your present, and your future are all made up. They are imaginary. Now, you might argue that it did actually happen. Fine, maybe that could be true, but you might be a brain in a jar. But if you're not, and it did actually happen, fine. But I promise you, you don't remember it the way it actually happened. Nope. You don't even experience the present moment as it's actually happening. And of course, your future hasn't happened yet. So that's made up. So the idea is like your representation of your past, present, and future is kind of your experience of life comes out of that. Mm-hmm. Or I guess the present is the place where the past and the present meet, or the past and the future meet. And like somebody I remember describing it said that the present is an interference pattern between the wave of the past and the future merging like this. And that's not a physics thing. That's an imaginary thing. That's like the present moment is where these two things and this line is moving like this. Mm-hmm. But your present is largely created by your representation of your past and your future. And your future is definitely created by a connection and interaction between your past and your present. So you can change these things.
Yeah.
And movies serve as a good metaphor for like thinking more creatively about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and the cool and interesting news is also this idea. Okay, I think my brain exploded and I got really excited, and one of those like, I want to run somewhere, but I don't know which direction kind of excitement, where I recognize that, okay, we never really actually remember what happened. We can't know what happened because we didn't experience it in real time, the way it actually looked, whatever was going on. We experienced it through our own filters and whatever, and we made decisions about what happened. But like, we're always looking through the eyes and filters of who we think we are now back at, when I say the past, people assume that I mean that when you're recalling a memory that you're going all the way back to when it happened and just like, oh, re-experiencing, but that's not how brains work. Brains only, they're like, I'm going to be really efficient. I'm just going to go scan the Polaroid from the last time we remembered this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to look at it with my now filters and a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of what the fuck happened, which is so amazing because what you think happened absolutely didn't. And what you think about it now is only in relation to who you think you are now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to finish that thought. The other part that I find really freaking fascinating is as much as we say that we can change who we are and we can affect our unconscious, and probably why I love utilizing movies to help make changes in this particular way. I like to sit down and say, here's how I would like to feel about life. Here's things that I want to experience in my life. And I ask my unconscious mind to help me have that experience. And I use the television show or the movie to do it, because most of my personality and who I am and what I've modeled happened before I had any language.
Right.
And before you have language, you're not storing memories. That's how it works. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember why I am who I am. I didn't put it all there, but most of what I do and who I am is like happened back there. So I may as well just ask the part of me that was me then to make the changes just so that I see the results, because I don't know where to poke.
This one got pretty trippy, but in honor of Total Recall, I think that is totally appropriate. And that being said, I got to run.
Okay.
So TV Deeply, folks, thanks for joining us.
Please do. Thanks for being here. Okay,
Have fun. See you next week. Bye.